Hmm?
Anybody in the room? Is anybody in the room? Can I turn your camera on?
I can't hear you.
Can I turn your camera on just to double check?
Sure.
Yes. Sometimes it's a little long.
Could you not mute? They can hear us.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Bienvenidos! Welcome everyone, and thank you for being part of today's crucial conversation on cognitive diversity. My name is Maria Kennedy, and I have the honor of hosting today's guest and asking him your questions. So please use the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen to share any questions you have for Dr. Castellano. Please also use the chat feature to share your comments, opinions, and personal experiences related to today's topic. We only have a short time together today, so please post your questions as soon as possible. You'll also notice at the bottom of your screen the letters CC and live transcript underneath. So if you'd like to read what is being said, please click that and the closed captions will appear on your screen. Thank you so much for completing our poll. So let's have a look and see. All right, so. Okay, so we have 28% of us as educators, 28% as therapists and psychologists. We have 31% as parents, and some people are relatives, and just a few of us that have had no experience. Well, welcome, welcome, welcome all of you for joining us today. And so I should, of course, introduce me.
Yeah, that would be good.
So I'm often referred to as the mad English woman because I like to innovate, and I'm from Manchester, England, aka the place where it's always raining, which is really funny because now I live in sunny old California and here it hardly ever rains. So my greatest accomplishment is the creation of my amazing son, Aaron. Yeah, you guessed it. I'm a very proud mom. His educational journey as a gifted Black boy has really been the catalyst for my innovation and challenging of the status quo. And no, I don't mean the band. This journey has taken us to several countries and has enabled us to have an unparalleled view of student access or lack of access to gifted education. I would like you to join the conversation so that we can effect a positive change in the educational process for all gifted and 2E or more students. So I would like to introduce you to my guest today, Dr. Jaime Castellano. But before we get into conversation, let me tell you a little bit about him. Dr. Jaime A. Castellano is recognized as one of our nation's leading authorities in the education of Hispanic, Latino students, and is identifying and serving low-income, racially, culturally, and linguistically diverse gifted students. In addition to his knowledge of gifted Hispanic, Latino students and gifted students from poverty, Dr. Castellano has expertise in identifying gifted African-American students, gifted Native American students, gifted English language learners, and gifted preschoolers. There is so much more that I could say about him, but I know you will learn so much from today's conversations. So it is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce today's esteemed guest, Dr. Jaime Castellano.
Maria, thank you for that kind introduction. And I think you hit it right when you said, I'm here to share information with the participants of this particular webinar using my combined practical experience in the classroom as an assistant principal, as a principal, working directly with those students, twice exceptional, thrice exceptional, as a scholar in the field, as a professor, as an advocate, and now in one of my current roles as a mental health specialist, often assigned twice exceptional students, primarily from poor Hispanic barrio communities, right? And so I have a vast amount of experience working with twice exceptional students that spans decades, right? So if I can empower, enlighten, and provide relevant information and data to the people that are here this afternoon, I feel it's a responsibility that I have, right? It's a way of me paying it forward for the work and the joy that I've received from working with this population. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, I just want to thank you so much right off the bat for joining us today. And so many years, Doctor. You don't actually look that old. You look very, very young. You're doing really well. So I just had to say that one to kick us off. Okay, so I'm going to start with a really hard question, probably not for you, but it is a question that lots of us are wondering. So why does the identification of twice exceptional students from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds continue to confound educators and psychologists?
Well, there are a myriad number of reasons as to why that is. At the top of the list is that these students are simply not a priority for the school or the school district where they come from, right? Meaning that most educators that are serving in our school system, whether it's a public school, a charter school, or a private school, just don't have the requisite background, undergraduate experience or graduate experience, and how to first identify this particular population of students. So what you don't know, and when you have a student that is twice exceptional that presents in your classroom, I would debate anyone by saying that in 9 times out of 10, that teacher, those educators are going to focus on the disability over the gifts and talents of the individual. And as a result, those kids are pigeonholed into special education or exceptional student education, or whatever your district or state refers to special needs students. And very rarely do we see those students being the focus of attention, or very rarely do we find a school or a school district who has an infrastructure in place that would identify and support these students as they go through their public school or charter school or private school, right? So in other words, ignorance is bliss, right? That is part of the equation as to why this population continues to confound educators and scholars alike. And some would even say that, how can that kid be gifted when they can't even read or write? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense, right? It's almost oxymoronic. And so I would say, Maria, that is one of the huge reasons why it's certainly a primary obstacle in terms of why twice exceptional students that are 3 or 4 times exceptional continue to be under-identified and underserved in programs for gifted, advanced, and high ability students.
Thank you so much, Jaime. So one of the questions already that has come in is asking whether or not the media kind of plays into the, you know, the vision or the views of our diverse populations. So one of the series that was mentioned was Atypical on Netflix. So does the way the media portrays our children, does that really play into why there are these limiting beliefs about their capabilities?
If you're talking about social media in general, I think the jury's still out on that, Maria. Okay. And I say that because there are references to television shows, to movies on the silver screen, and documentaries that have been made that promote the identification and education of twice exceptional students through their own narrative, through their personal stories that they tell, right? There are a number of them that we can document and that I would dare to say should be on everyone's viewing list or reading list, right? And so I'm not convinced that how the media portrays these particular students is a reason why they continue to confound educators and the public in general. I would offer you something for your consideration. You may have heard of a group that's called the G Word, right? Yeah. Based out of California as well. And yep. They're doing, I sit on their advisory board, and they are focusing primarily on the historically underserved and underidentified student. And of course, under that umbrella are students that are twice exceptional. So I would ask those that are in attendance to, you know, Google the G Word, and then you'll see that that is a resource that is user-friendly, friendly in general, Maria, if you will, for those who advocate for special populations of gifted students.
I'm really, really happy that you mentioned the G Word, Jaime, because part of the resources that that organization provides is actually some video footage that can be used within the classrooms. And so I totally concur with you. Everybody really should check that out because there is an awful wealth of information there for us all. So Jaime, could you share with us your own personal experiences being an expert in the field of of identifying, you know, twice and thrice exceptional students?
You know, I wrote this article for you, right, in your recent Variations publication. And in that article, I write about a student that I had. His name was Leonardo, right? Leonardo was one of 12 students that I had in a self-contained special education classroom in an elementary school, and the students in my class were in grades 3, 4, and 5, and intermediate level students. There were 12 of them. The majority of the instruction was conducted in Spanish, right, because they were all primarily Spanish speakers. And one of the students that I had was this boy, Leonardo. Leonardo had some emotional and behavioral issues. That's why he was in my program. And he would often crawl under the desk. He would throw tantrums. He would disrupt the class, challenge me as the teacher. He was a handful, right? On the one hand. But on the other hand, he had this amazing gift and talent in the area of science. He would recite facts and provide information that was beyond what you would expect from a third grader. Just in science, generally speaking, but he had a particular fascination with animals and dinosaurs, right? And he had a lot of information about that. those particular topics. Those were his interest areas, those were his passions, and that's where he devoted a lot of his focus and attention. So I would often think to myself, man, how can I want to wring the neck of this little boy on the one hand, but on the other hand say, well, wow, man, this kid really knows a lot in science. And at that time, you know, that was one of my first teaching jobs. I was young, didn't know any better. And so my focus was only on the disability. So in a conversation I may have had with you or with someone else, I commented that in reflecting on working with Leonardo, if I knew then what I know now, I would have referred and nominated him as a twice exceptional student for the district's gifted programs with an emphasis on science, right? Because in most states, science is one of those qualifying areas when it comes to academic achievement. And so that was 35 years ago, Maria. Okay, so what does that tell us? That tells us that these kids have always existed in our schools. It's just in the last 5 to 7, 8 years where they've been getting a lot more press lately, right? So that is as a practitioner, right? That is as a classroom teacher with those kids day in and day out. And then in my role as an assistant principal and as a principal, I've had special ed classes in my buildings that I supervised, both gifted and special needs. And in those administrative experiences, I have with twice exceptional students, so all across the board. So my experience is comprehensive, right? As a practitioner, as an administrator, as a university professor, as a scholar, as an author, as a coach. And so that's why I'm excited that I can bring this information to you, because not only have I lived it, it's part of my passion, right, to work with this population. And if that means sharing what I know, I'm more than happy to do so.
Thank you so much, Jaime. And so the article that Jaime is referring to is in our Variations magazine. Yeah. And if you check on our website, then you will have access to it, or email us at crucialconversations@2enews.org. I never get the URL right, but we'll send you out that resource. The article itself is truly amazing.
It is a good article. It is a good publication. And you know what? You should be promoting that nationally, okay? Because it is a wonderful document. What you guys doing through your Variations publications is outstanding, and it needs to be shared with the world.
Oh, thank you. We were very, very blessed to have such amazing contributors like you, Jaime.
It's world class.
Oh, that's great. So you heard it from the expert himself. So you all definitely need to be reading. Yeah, definitely. So Jaime, there are lots of myths surrounding the identification and the education of twice exceptional and culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. I mean, you did mention it also in your article, but there's been a lot of conversation as to whether or not it's the type of test we use. It is the environment in which the kids are raised. I mean, there are a lot of contributing factors, but what's the myth that maybe is preventing us from truly identifying those gifted students who are culturally and linguistically different?
Maria, hay bastantes razones. Maria, there are plenty of reasons, right? And you know what? The biggest one of all, the biggest myth, believe it or not, it's a belief that that children cannot be both gifted and disabled. I mean, that myth is still perpetuated even in our own education community, right? By people who are uninformed. And that's why I made that reference earlier about ignorance. Ignorance is bliss, and people don't know what they don't know, right? That continues to be one of the biggest myths that exist. And The very small percentage of students that are officially diagnosed by their school or school district as twice exceptional continues to be minuscule compared to like the general population and other subgroups that have been historically underserved and underidentified. That is why it continues to be one of the biggest myths that are out there, right? So that's what this type of service that you're providing is so important for getting out the correct information. And so I would say that that is one of the biggest problems. Another big myth that we see, Maria, that is challenging to overcome or to get people to understand is that twice exceptional students are all the same. And we know that they are not, right? Everybody has their own narrative. Everybody has their own story to tell. Everybody has their own journey. And strategies and programs and materials that may work with one individual may not necessarily work with another individual, even within the same class, Maria. You hear what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I offered to you, as an example, many of the twice exceptional students that I work with, right? And so some have a learning disability and are academically years behind, but show such great intellectual prowess that you can help identify them as twice exceptional. And then you have those students that have mental health issues, that are emotionally disturbed, which is an IDEA category, right? Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And many of the twice exceptional students that I personally work with have that particular label. And they are gifted, intellectually advanced, right, compared to their peer group. And then we have others, and you may even have some on your own campus, Maria, students that are identified as oppositional defiant disorder or behavior disordered, right, which is another official category under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, but who are also intellectually superior. So when we think about just the special ed side, it's all across, it could be all across the board. And then we talk about the gifted side. Are you talking about general intellectual ability? Or are you talking about, well, this kid can really fly in reading, but needs to be in a regular program, maybe even get some tutoring in math, or vice versa, right? And so that's another myth that exists. And that's why it's important that when you look at either an IEP or an advanced academic plan, that you have to see twice exceptional language in whatever document that your district or school uses. It's imperative because, as you know, what is written in an IEP or an advanced academic plan that's part of a twice exceptional student's roadmap to education is a legally binding document, right? And so it's important that if it is a twice exceptional student, that's part and parcel of what needs to happen for them to avoid this type of myth, that they're all the same. Okay, then we look at other myths like twice exceptional students are too bright to need help. You know what? If they're gifted, that means they're intellectually more advanced than their peer group. So if they're that intelligent, why can't they figure it out on their own, man? Why do we got to spend resources, human resources, materials, and supplies when these kids are smart, man? They can figure it out. They don't need help. Okay, you and I both know that's a myth, right? Yeah. And so all of the kids qualify because of their behavior problems. No, not the case. We just talked about that. Twice exceptional children may be highly sensitive to their emotional and physical environments. Yeah, we could argue that, but I'm telling you, it's a myth. right? Yeah, there are going to be some twice exceptional children where that may be true, right? But I would say in a lot of cases, it's not. And so those are some of the myths that are perpetuated up there, Maria. There are a number of them. I just mentioned a few. That's why it's important that your audience understand the importance of doing the research, right? Googling, going online, checking out places like your school and the resources that your school can provide them. If not direct access to information, then sharing other resources that they can access that would benefit them and their families, right?
Thank you so much, Jaime.
Yeah.
So piggybacking on that, one of the questions that we were asked was that Indigenous cultures have different perspectives, about giftedness in their communities. So could you share your views about the process of identification where Western models may not be entirely relevant?
You know what, you do always have to be culturally sensitive, right? That's part of our journey towards becoming culturally competent and culturally proficient. I can say, Maria, with pride and with honor, that I spent 3 years as a principal on the Navajo Indian Reservation in the upper mountains of Arizona, in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Right? So I have that experience. When I arrived at that school, Maria, it was an intermediate school. So I had kids, they were 100% Navajo and grades 4, 5, and 6. And when I got to that school, they had no students identified as gifted, not only at that intermediate school, but in the entire district, none. And because I have the experience that I have in the field, and as a turnaround principal, the first thing I look at is who are my best and brightest students, who are the gifted and talented. We're going to work with that core group to help us get out of this hole that we're in, right? And so your viewer, your participant is correct. There are beliefs that particular indigenous group, the Navajo, had with regards to how those kids should be educated. And one of them is that it's the group before the self, right? You're part of what they call a clan on the Navajo Indian Reservation. And that is your primary responsibility to the clan. And all members of the clan are related or associated with in one way or another, right? And so when I got there and there were no gifted kids, I was like, well, how can that be? I know they're there. So I thought to myself, you know what, I'm going to speak to the senior Navajo teachers that were on the staff and ask what their thoughts are, because these were men and women who were themselves Navajo, raised as Navajo children, who happened to become educators and who went back to the reservation. So I asked, how could it be that none of their students, none of the children are gifted, advanced, or high ability? And their response was very honest. And they said, well, nobody's ever asked about these kids before. And so I was like, okay, well, I would like to change that. What do I have to do in order to promote or to adopt or to begin the planning for implementing a gifted program made up primarily of Navajo students? They thought it was a great idea and that the community, the Navajo community in that particular district, which was the Ganado district up in the northern mountain range of Arizona. And we spoke to some of the elders, we got community feedback, we spoke with parents, and everybody was on board. The caveat, Maria, getting to the point of the question, was that that program could not interfere but those students studies in Navajo language and Navajo culture. And I was like, you know what? We're going to use that to our advantage. Okay, Navajo language and Navajo culture. Are you kidding me? That would be a great segue for building and promoting a gifted program. And so we did, Maria. We, as the building principal and as the district's unofficial gifted coordinator, I mass tested all Navajo kids in grades 1 through 7. And after we did all the scoring of the assessments, we identified about 75 Navajo kids as gifted based on traditional processes for identifying culturally and linguistically diverse students, right? And within that bunch, there were a couple that were twice exceptional Navajo Indians. And so because of, limitations of resources, we had to, be a little creative in what we did. And so we developed a partnership with Purdue University, who had just received a massive Javits grants to work with Indigenous students in the area of gifted education math. So, it was serendipity, if you will, coincidental, A met B, and the rest, as they say, is history. But that person is correct, Maria. You do have to consider, you have to ask permission, you have to seek guidance from the people you're affecting, right? And when you're working with an Indigenous group, it's often the elders of the community or the representatives, the leadership of the clans. So yeah, there you have it.
That's awesome, JB. Thank you so much.
Jaime is Jaime.
Jaime. Oh gosh, so sorry, Jaime. So piggybacking on that, because one of the questions that we were also asked is about, in a public school setting, how are parents and guardians made aware that there is help available for their child outside of the school they're currently enrolled in through an IEP or something similar? And you talked about how you went to the elders and how you involved the whole community in the identification of those thrice exceptional students. And so I'm thinking that there has to be more there that parents can do outside of or through the IEP process to really get some help for them with their students.
You know what, Maria, I'm gonna say this. I was a special ed teacher. And that was my career when I was in the classroom, right? For 7 years, worked with students with special needs. And in those 7 years, I worked with families that were disenfranchised. Many of the families had parents that were illiterate in both English and their heritage language. These are families and communities that were marginalized by the larger society, right? And so having been put in the position as the teacher of their children, I often found the need, the desire, if you will, to provide those parents and families with the information that they needed to effectively advocate for their children, right? So I would present with them questions that they should ask, who they should be talking to, because when you look at an IEP, the parent has the absolute last right to do whatever it is that they need to do to advocate for their child, right? And so let me get back to your question, right? A twice exceptional student, what can families do? What can parents do? I would say this, you go and you speak to that principal of the school where your child attends, and you have a list of questions that you ask. If you don't know what questions to ask, call me, call Maria, call someone that you know that has experience working and advocating for twice exceptional students so we can arm you with the weapons you need to effectively advocate. So you ask those questions of the principal. If you're not satisfied with the principal, go to the principal supervisor, go to the district's ESC coordinator, special ed coordinator, go to the district's gifted education director or coordinator, do the research, go to the University of Iowa Bell Blank Center and look at the work of Megan Foley Nickpan, right? Go to the University of Denver, Houston, and look at the work of Dr. Matt Fugit, who will help educate parents on what it is that they need to do to help their kids. I know that I am often asked to speak across the country to the Hispanic, Latino parents of students that are enrolled in the schools. And I provide them, first of all, what I call a Bill of Rights. These are your, I don't care if you're undocumented, poor, I don't care. These are your rights. You have all the rights here in this relationship. I provide them with a list of questions they should be asking about their children, whether it is just gifted education, whether it is special education, or whether it's twice exceptionality. So we have a responsibility to help parents, empower them, right, with the right information and the right resources. And so that is what I would advise a parent to do. Not only that, in my publications, I write how important it is that parents connecting with parents, right? Parents and parents working collaboratively, sharing experiences, and to grow the movement within their own community, because not only are they advocating for their own children, they'll be advocating for a greater circle of children, right? And that's what we want to develop and create when we provide parents this information. So we want to be resource people and resource providers for them. I hope that answers the question.
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. And Jaime, that is definitely what we need. We need a call to arms. We need to arm our parents with the confidence and the voice. And I totally concur that they need to seek advice and to talk to people who are in the field so that they can ask the right questions, because all of our students are entitled to services. But if you don't ask the right questions often, our students don't get the services to which they're entitled.
Okay, so let me share one more experience with you about that. And this is like real. This is raw. Okay, and this really happened. I couldn't believe I was sitting in a room with educators. I was like, "What are you people doing?" Okay, so it was a twice exceptional kindergartner, Maria. It was a kindergartner. The mother was beside herself, didn't know what to do. The kid was self-mutilating. He was violent. He was aggressive, but smart as a whip. Okay, and she was working with the school that her child was attending, and they were sending him home. They were suspending him. They weren't providing service. I'm like, the kid is 5. Look what the school is putting this 5-year-old through. And so I told the parent, you know what? Ask for an emergency IEP meeting to better see if we could better address his needs. Okay, but this time she invited me to go with her as her advocate, because I was her son's case manager through a local social service mental health agency. And so I went with her, and they didn't know I had a special ed background. They didn't know I had advanced degrees in special ed and in gifted ed and twice exceptionality. They didn't know any of that. And they were all Caucasian females. And this mother was just small in stature, uneducated, scared, trying to figure out what she was going to do for her son, right? When I got there, Maria, I was embarrassed and angry in how a group of professionals treated that mother. And I said so. And I made them all feel very uncomfortable. I did that intentionally, Because how could they have the audacity and the gall to treat a hurting mother like that? Right. I was very upset and I let them know. And I needed to put them in check so they, know how to work with other parents that they come across in the future like that. So it happens more often than you think, Maria. I know because I advocate for these families and different groups. And I've been in those meetings where I've had to, put them in check and let them know that, we are here to do what's in the best interest of the child and to please treat us with dignity and respect. We deserve that. We're trying to do what's right for our child, and the hope is that you understand that, right? It had to get that basic, which is unfortunate, right? But I think that example signifies a lot of the myths that exist, the relationships that need to be strengthened, and like the communication, the collaboration, and the collegiality that needs to exist to move these kids forward.
Most definitely.
And I know I'm being a little passionate, but that's just who I am.
Jaime, I love your passion, and we need more people to be out there being passionate so that we can get what is in the best interest for all of our students. Often, though, for the students themselves, there is a little bit of denial. One of the questions we were asked is, what are your experiences on female students that are very good at masking themselves to be part of the class, especially when teenagers with only focus on disabilities, possibly dyslexia experience, but no interest within themselves that giftedness is an outlet. Right. She said that her daughter knows her giftedness, but as it was only just diagnosed, she's really just not kind of into it, emphasized, or she doesn't even want it mentioned. She'd really like to stay under the radar. So could giftedness even be seen possibly as a curse? Something that we don't want to admit to, and we just want to stay, under the radar and just be the same as everybody else.
Right. Okay, so you know what, Maria? You said this kid's a teen?
Yes.
Okay, you know what? I have extensive experience working with teens, gifted teens, teens with special needs, and twice exceptional teens. And I can tell you that when I work with teenagers who have this idea that, man, you know what? I don't want to be gifted. I want to stay under the radar. I want to mask that part of my life. It has to beg the question, why? Okay, so when we talk about teens that we know are gifted, but do not demonstrate their gifts and talents, I need to know what's going on, because there's something that they're not telling. There's something that they're not saying. It may be a traumatic event. It may be that they were bullied. It may be that they've seen something or heard something that sticks in their mind and is why they mask their giftedness. And does it come from home? Does it come from their peer group? Does it come from school? So do you see how complex that is, Maria, when you're working with the teen? Yeah. Because if they're gifted, that means that they're intellectually advanced, man, for their age, right? So if they're intellectually advanced, chances are they know how to manipulate and have been doing manipulation for a real long time. That has been my experience. Okay. And primarily with Hispanic and Latino teens. They like to play mind games. I'm like, you want to play mind games? Let's go. I'll play mind games with you. But here's what I do know. In the end, I'll get the truth. Because here's my point, Maria. When you have a teen like that, you have to be just very frank. You have to be very raw if you want to get to the heart of why they believe that they don't deserve to be recognized as a smart, intelligent, divergent thinking, creative individual. I mean, to you and I, that's a blessing. It is in fact a gift. But why do they believe the way they believe, right? And so you see, man, earlier you heard me talk about the need to collaborate and to be collegial and to communicate. And in the cases like this, if that mom or dad sees that or hears that from their child, you know what? I need to identify allies in my effort to understand why my son or my daughter is saying and thinking like that. Because I've been in the game long enough to know that when a teen starts saying that, no, there's something more deeply seated in the head, man, that needs to come out. Tell me. And if you want to tell me, you know what, I'm cool with that. I don't have to be the one. And that's one of the things that parents need to know and educators need to know about working with twice exceptional students. You may not be the one they trust the most. And so you have to understand that and accept that, right? If we want to do what's in the best interest of that kid, let them speak to the person that they trust the most, right? Where they can feel liberated in how they represent themselves and what they say. So that's where you got to start developing the allies. But for a teen like that, I'm like, nah, man, we got to talk. You got to tell me something. Okay, we got to find out what's going on, get to the bottom of it. Because until you do, Maria, how are you gonna move forward?
Most definitely. I know that often for a lot of our children, though, being different causes them to be the target of bullies. So
been there, done that. Myself personally, as a gifted preteen and teen. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I had to say
no,
that.
so I was going to say, so how can we help support those children who are at the mercy of bullies? You know, how is it more on, are there external agencies that can help them? Is it more on trying to build our children up so that they really understand the power that they have? You know, what steps could parents be taking to try and help support their children who are, you know, at the mercy of a bully because they're gifted, because they're different?
Here's what I would say, Maria, for parents who may have children that are being bullied, that you have to do your work. You have to do your homework. You have to investigate. Okay, if you're noticing a sudden change in the behavior of your child and you know something's going on, then you need to ask those questions of that child. And if they're not saying, as a parent, I need to know who the friends are, because I will call that friend. I'm like, here's what's going on, man. What could you tell me? So the mom or the dad literally needs to insert themselves even more in the lives of their children, to understand that particular part of their psyche, right? The bullying part and how it's impacting their mental health. And if I'm not going to get it from the child, I need to get it from somewhere else. And first I'm gonna work with the friends that I know of my son or daughter. I'm gonna work with the teachers. Man, what could you tell me? So you're gathering information, right? You're gathering information, trying to understand what's going on. But I think the biggest clue is the change in behavior, Maria. And if you start seeing those changes in behavior because the gift your gifted child is being bullied, then you have to do what you need to do as a parent. You're certainly not going to stand by and let that happen, right? You want to be able to help your son. You want to be able to help your daughter, and you do so by bringing in others, expanding your network of resources, right? And so I think if you start there, and your child sees that you mean business, that you are there to help, you're a facilitator, right? You want what's best for your child. You have to have that conversation with them and let them know that you're in it together, right? And that there is nothing that you won't do to protect them. If you give those kids perhaps that sense of security, that sense of safety, then perhaps you can begin shifting the psyche in their mind, right? Like, okay, you know what? I don't have to tolerate this bully. There are people I can talk to. I know that in my work with gifted teens in our community, I provide them the 211 resource, right? If you feel you're feeling bullied, if you feel that you just can't take it anymore, you don't want to talk to your mom, you don't want to talk to anyone at school, call 211, right? It's like a helpline, a hotline here in Palm Beach County that they can call. And so providing your child those avenues as well is a good idea, because you want to keep them safe, right? And you want to prevent them from experiencing suicide ideation because of being bullied. And those are severe mental health issues, right? And so we want to prevent those. So the sooner you can dig in and figure out what's happening, the better off you'll be.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jaime. So you mentioned earlier on some other resources for people, some people who they could study and, read up on. So we've only got a few minutes left. So in these last few minutes, can you expound on what your hopes are for the education of our 2E and 3E students?
My hopes are that the scholars in the field begin to promote, begin to conduct additional research in the area of twice exceptionality. You heard me mention Dr. Matthew Fugate, F-U-G-A-T-E. He's from the University of Houston downtown. He is an expert in this field. He has done a lot of recent publications that are rooted in his experiences as a teacher, as a coordinator. I want to even say, Maria, that he himself was twice exceptional. So, he brings that personal perspective. Then, of course, when we talk about the Mount Rushmore of scholars in twice exceptionality, you have to include Dr. Megan Foley-Nickpom from the University of Iowa, and she's part of the Bellin Blank Center. And the Bellin Blank Center at the University of Iowa dedicates itself to gifted education, and they have members within that umbrella that specialize in different areas of gifted education. Megan happens to specialize in twice exceptionality. In all of my publications over the past 20 years where they were edited volumes, she was my go-to for the chapters on twice exceptionality. Yeah, Dr. There you go. There you go. It's on the screen there. And of course, the early work of Dr. Linda Silverman, right? It's important that if you want some historical context, I think she's even doing some recent stuff. So she's been in this a long time. And I think she does focus a lot of her work on indigenous groups, underrepresented groups. So she would be a third resource. Of course, I would have to mention SENG, right? Supporting the emotional needs of the gifted. I have to mention CEC TAG, the Council for Exceptional Children, the Association of the Gifted, and of course NAGC. I think that if you were to go into any of one of their websites and go into the search engine and type in twice exceptionality, you probably would be directed to white papers, monographs, articles, and other information specific to twice exceptionality. Dr. Mike Postma, he is associated with SENG. And he has authored a couple of books on twice exceptionality because he has 2 children himself that are twice exceptional. And so in terms of resources, Maria, they're out there, including your own school and the experts you have on your campus and who are on your leadership team or the school's leadership team, right? If your school is one that accommodates the educational twice exceptional students. Everyone on your staff is an expert, right? And it's your people that should be going to Confertute, that should be going to the Educopias, the NHEC conferences, the CEC TAG conferences, man, to spread that word, right? I'm gonna say, Maria, that based on my own personal experiences as an educator, counting my first experience in 1989 with Leonardo, it was just a drop, Maria, just a drop. But here we are now, 35 years later. That drop has developed a series of concentric circles, waves, if you will. And now we have a core group of scholars in the field of gifted education that focus intentionally on twice exceptional students. As a matter of fact, Maria, I don't know if you're aware, I'm sure you are, that NAGC has a SIG, a special interest group on twice exceptionality. And they do great work and put out great information. So I would say to your audience that that is yet another resource that you can provide. Maria, 20 years ago, man, you Google twice exceptionality, you'd be like, I get the blank page, man, what's up?
Most definitely, Jaime.
Now you Google twice exceptionality, you're gonna get a lot of information.
Which is awesome. And we need even more information out there. And we need our parents and our educators to keep delving into this field to improve the education for all of our students. Dr. Castellano, I cannot thank you enough. The information that you've shared with us today has truly been enlightening and inspiring. It has been an absolute pleasure to be able to spend these precious moments and minutes with you. And you've definitely helped, I think, move us all forward. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. When we end, you'll get a short survey. Please take a few minutes to fill it out, as it includes questions about scheduling, and we really do want your input. Like I said earlier, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email crucialconversations@2ecenter.org. Next month, my guest will be the head of Bridges Academy, Carl Sabatino. So make sure that you join me. Thank you all so much and be safe. We'll see you next month.
Gracias, Maria.
Gracias. And hopefully that is, I'm no longer...